Okay, this is part 29 of Rebel. I still have the fan going, which is that soft humming in the background. Please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Like, I don't think that you guys understand how much it does. Okay. Los Angeles, Republic of America, Eden. I spend the entire 12 hours on the plane sketching one schematic after another. It's the same habit that emerges every time I'm trying to distract myself from my anxieties. My drawings are of what I remember from working on Dominic Hahn's device, but they're not enough. I hadn't gotten access to everything, and as a result, all I end up with is an unfinished idea of how he managed to take down the entire Antarctican system in Ross City in one fell swoop. Eden. It takes me a while to realize that Pressa is saying my name. I startle out of my sketching to see her staring pointedly at me, a cup of steaming tea in her hands. She puts it on the table before me. Thanks, I mutter, forcing myself to sit back in my seat and wrap my hands around the cup. The heat of it scalds my skin, but the sudden shock feels nice too. Pressa turns her dark eyes towards the window. She tucks her hair behind her ears. Thanks for taking me with you, she says in a low voice. She's been quiet for most of the trip, her eyes hollow and red with grief. Now she glances uncomfortably around the Elector's jet. It's a luxurious space, its rounded ceiling high and its sides lined with smooth couches and chairs. Behind us, two full-length beds with thick curtains draped over them bookend the back of the plane, along with a bathroom that rivals the one in our apartment. Her gaze settles again and again on the Elector, who sits at the other end near the front of the plane and talks in low voices with June. Daniel lounges beside her, his face trained idly on the scene outside the window. Despite his attempts to look like he's not paying attention to what they're saying, I can tell he's taking in every bit of it, just like how he's noticing where I am right now and what I'm doing, even though he'd never show it. Press's eyes dart briefly to my schematics and up to me. You're gonna need the rest if you want to make any progress, you know, she finally murmurs. You've been at it nonstop for the entire flight. I know, I rub my bleary eyes. The level system was destroyed because of me. My own engine powered that machine, and I just let it happen. I have to figure this out. Her eyes soften at me. This wasn't your fault. Wasn't it, though? I put my cup down in disgust. I never should have taken you to the drone race. What choice did you have? I say gently. You were trying to help your father, and instead I gave Han the last piece of the puzzle that he needed. And now Mr. Yu is gone. I see fresh pain across Press's face and bury my head in my hands. Numbers and blueprints crowd my exhausted mind. Finally, Pressa shakes her head. Han would have gotten it somehow, with or without you. He couldn't have moved as fast as he did otherwise. She leans her elbows against the table between us. How long must it have taken him to set that up? Months? Years? I flip incessantly through my useless sketches. Long enough that no one noticed him building up that kind of infrastructure. The only consolation I have is that at least he did use a part of something I'd created. It gives me some starting point to try to figure out the rest of the puzzle at least, but there isn't much time for that. As I think about Han, I feel a strange tug in my chest of something uncertain. The memory of the man's grave eyes comes back to me, along with the story he told me about what had happened to his family. You remind me of my son. Those words of his shouldn't stick with me. For all I know, they could be a lie. But the grief in his eyes as he'd said them. He'd let my brother go. He'd let me go. He'd taken down the very system that Daniel had argued against to his superiors, that I'd hated and defied every chance I could get. It's his fault that Press's father is dead, I try to remind myself. But was it Han who had killed him or Ross City's system? The plane dips slightly and an announcement from our captain comes on the speakers. I pause to glance out the window and see a familiar outline of land emerging beneath the clouds, the curve of California's coast. Suddenly, thoughts of Han dull as I realize that we are now officially over the waters of the Republic. On the other side of the plane, Daniel stiffens at the sight and straightens in his seat. For a brief moment, his eyes flicker to mine. I remember the last time we'd visited, how uncomfortable he'd been to return to our homeland. Now we're back, and the Republic is strangely our savior. Half an hour later, we've emerged from the plane and are headed down the ramparts. I follow quietly behind June and the Elector. Beside me, Pressa clings tightly to my arm as she studies the entrance into Los Angeles' airport. Everything looks so different here, as if we'd gone back in time to a different era. Towering brutal columns draped with bold banners of red and black heralding the elector's return to his country. Tall, harsh rectangular windows, no augmented overlays or hovering digital images. Daniel is also unusually quiet, his head lowered and his hands shoved into his pockets. Republic soldiers in familiar formal red and black uniforms snap to attention as we pass by. I can see my brother flinch slightly when they move. Even when we'd been here weeks ago for my interview, he was quieter than usual. Every instinct in him must be telling him that these guards are here to kill us, to arrest him, to take away his family. Suddenly I feel a rush of guilt at his days spent constantly wandering the Undercity. It's one thing to hear him tell me how much he wants to leave our past behind. It's another to see the past haunting every line of his body. As we're ushered into the airport, a throng of waiting reporters flock to the railings, holding them back. A barrage of cameras clicks into overdrive, and we're engulfed in a sea of blinding lights and roaring voices. Mr. Wing, Daniel, Commander Icarus, Elector, over here! I blink, taken aback by the onslaught. Ahead of me, Daniel stiffens even more beside June, keeping his head down as the news crews push forward toward us. I put an arm instinctively around Pressa, who has gone wide-eyed at the mess of a scene. June looks the calmest of all of us. She lifts her head and snaps her fingers at the other guards walking alongside the Elector, and they tighten their formation protectively. Then she pushes herself beside Daniel enough for their shoulders to come together. When an overly eager reporter sticks his camera too close to Daniel's face, June shoves him unceremoniously back. Make way! Keep this area clear! Her voice is unwavering and efficient. The reporters part obediently, but then keep trailing us in a constant tide. Daniel, Eden, over here! I turn at the familiar voice. There, in the midst of the crowd gathered to see the Electors and Daniel's arrival, is Tess, her face as bright as ever and her arm waving high over others' heads. She doesn't try going up to June, who's technically still in formation and guarding the Elector, but I do see the two exchange a grin and wink. Then Tess darts away from the Elector's entourage and makes a beeline for us. I'd first seen her again a month ago, when we'd returned to the Republic for my interview. I hadn't recognized much in her then of the little girl I remembered, small, uncertain, with hunched shoulders and wide eyes, always wringing her hands. She'd grown tall and straight-backed, her hair cut into a short brown bob, her movements confident and precise to match her surgeon demeanor. But the glint in her eyes, the bright echo in her voice, that stayed, and it's still here now. She waits until we've emerged and the guards allow her through, then steps toward us and throws her arms around Daniel's neck. My brother doesn't hesitate. He wraps his arms around her and hugs her so tightly that he lifts her slightly off the ground. Cameras around us click wildly. As he puts her back down, he tweaks her nose the same way he used to do to me as a child. She protests, shoving him in the shoulder, like his second sibling. He just laughs. It makes me realize how long it's been since I've heard such a light-hearted sound come from him. Welcome back, she exclaims, beaming at him, then looking over to Pressa and me. Her hand comes up to pat my cheek. You haven't been sleeping well since the last time I saw you. I'm fine now, I say, trying not to let my embarrassment show. Nearby, Pressa watches with an uncertain look on her face. Tess smiles shyly at her before she holds out her hand. Pressa takes it and Tess shakes it once. This is Pressa, I tell her, a friend of mine. What I want to say is my best friend, my confidant, the girl who makes me bolder than I think I can be, but a friend of mine just comes out. It sounds careless, even cold. Nice to meet you, Tess says to her, and she manages to smile back. Likewise, Pressa answers, but I can see the slight tension in the way she steps away from me. Several cars are waiting for us at the airport's loading zone. Pressa and I follow Daniel into a second car. June and Tess climb into the seats in front of us. The doors shut and the din from outside fades to a hum of noise. Here, Daniel's shoulders relax and he leans back against the leather headrests. The Republic may not have the high tech of Antarctica. There aren't auto cars or rails running everywhere here, but it's kind of comforting. Our driver, a Republic soldier, gives us all a terse nod before he follows the Elector's train of cars as they pull onto the road ahead. News about Antarctica has been all over the news here, Tess says as she swivels around in her seat to look back at us. Is it true what happened to their level system? I thought that was supposed to be completely secure. Nothing's completely secure, Daniel says in the silence afterward. We don't know how fast it could go down, though. Everything works until it doesn't. Now what? June looks from Daniel to me, her eyes quicksilver as bars of sunlight and shadow slide through the car's interior. What is this man's plan? Daniel shakes his head. You crumble a place's foundation, crack its walls, and anything can get in. There are fires in the streets, everything's chaos. And chaos is exactly what someone like Dominic Hahn likes best. There's real anger in his voice. With this blow, Hahn is going to take advantage of this mask of liberation to seize power for himself. In chaos, monsters rise quickly. Whether or not Hahn actually is a monster, I'm still not sure. Tess frowns at us and shakes her head. We all know what chaos can do, she says impatiently, waving a hand at us. But I think what June's asking is what he wants to do with that chaos, specifically. At that, Pressa straightens beside me, shaken out of her daze at the overwhelming introduction to the Republic. She tilts her head at Tess. I hadn't thought about that, she says. Han's taken down the entire system. What if he knows enough about it to bring it back up, put it back in place, and change it to suit him? Tess nods back at her. It's what a dictator would do, she replies. Pure anarchy is never what they're going for. A thought snaps into place. Sometimes I forget that Tess is a girl who had scraped by on the streets and barely survived the same revolution we had. She's no stranger to understanding how a society falls apart. It seems like an obvious next step. Why would Han go as far as taking down a system of control just to throw it away? And suddenly I find myself thinking about my schematic doodles in a different light. I dig into my pocket and bring all the papers out in a crinkly mess. Then I straighten them in my lap. Pressa looks over my shoulder as I do. No wonder there were so many parts of the machine that felt to me like they didn't need to exist. Maybe it's because the machine was never meant to just take down the level system. Maybe Han's invention is also designed to bring it back up. When I glance up, I see Daniel's eyes locked on mine. This, at least, is something he recognizes in me, when he sees the flash of an idea on my face. What are you thinking, Eden? He asks. It's time for someone else to run this place. Han's last words to me flash through my thoughts, searing and clear. What if Han is going to rebuild it? I say automatically. The level system, I mean. I point to the several parts of the machine that I hadn't figured out. What if he's going to implement a new system, one that has him at the helm? The pause that follows is thick and ominous. June finally nods at me. How much do you know about his device? She asks. Not enough, I reply. Any is better than none. She raises an eyebrow at me. I hate to say it, but your meddling might be just the thing that takes Han down.